Hello everyone, welcome back to Kamari TV reaction videos. So we're still reacting to top 5 unknown from the YouTube channel here on YouTube, and this is 5 insane teenager freakouts after giving a prison sentence. So let's see what these criminal badass kids did. Damn criminals.
Any parent can tell you that some teens can be difficult to handle. Still, it's hard to consider any of them evil most of the time.
Please.
It's difficult to comprehend a teen.
Have you seen kids nowadays? 20 to 20?
Crime. Yet nearly every day, somewhere in the world, a teenager stands trial for their crimes. Consider the mixture of an underdeveloped, hormone-crazed teen and a violent criminal coming together in a courtroom. When some teens are found guilty, they react in crazy, disturbing, or depressing ways.
They do.
Number 5. In 2013, 16-year-old Dylan Shoemaker was living at home with his mother. His girlfriend, Ashley Smith, and her 2 young sons had recently been kicked out of their home. As a result, Ashley and the children were living with Dylan Shoemaker and his mom. Ashley had a busy work schedule and would often leave her sons with Dylan, whom she thought she could trust. While babysitting the 2 boys, 23-month-old Austin and his 3-month-old brother, tragedy struck. It's unclear exactly what events unfolded at the Shoemaker home that day, but Dylan explained in court that he was tired and frustrated from babysitting. He said he hadn't gotten much sleep the night before and was worn out from the toddler's energy and tantrums. According to what he says happened, he put both boys to bed for a nap, but just a few minutes later, Austin started to cry. Dylan says he couldn't get the toddler to calm down and was worried that the younger child would wake up as a result. In what he claims was an act of desperation, he put a pillow over Austin's head and began punching it. Austin didn't survive this. Dylan was arrested and immediately charged. A trial began in which texts were found on Dylan's phone and were used as evidence. The timestamps from the text imply that after Austin passed, Dylan did nothing for several hours. He didn't call anyone for help, he just carried on with his normal day. A call recorded also quoted Dylan saying, "I'm a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry and they're going to feel sorry for me," which further supported the theory that Dylan felt no remorse. Dylan argued in court that he was a disturbed teen and didn't know right from wrong or how to control his anger. He pleaded, trying to convince the judge.
Oh god, yes, I remember that story vividly. I was like, oh yeah, he looked like he's ready to eat them kids.
Circumstances, any 16-year-old would know not to abuse a child. The judge also mentioned the fact that Dylan had plenty of time to get help but chose not to. While it's still likely that Dylan suffers from clinical anger or mental issues, those facts were not used in the case because he was considered competent for trial. The trial carried on until 2014 after Dylan turned 17. In the final court hearing, Dylan was found guilty and sentenced to the maximum punishment of 25 years to life. When the judge read out his sentence, Dylan broke down crying and began pleading to his ex-girlfriend. The judge shut them down by describing Dylan as a manipulator that doesn't regret what he's done.
He did.
Instead, only regrets getting caught.
Yes.
He also reminded the court that if he were to allow Dylan back into society, he would be a threat to the others around him. As the sentence was read, Dylan sobbed.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. Actually, I really didn't. I really think I did that. I didn't mean to hurt him. I can't take back what was done. I wish I could. I would give my life for Austin. I loved him a lot.
Austin Smith was completely defenseless. That's a given. But there were other dynamics at work there, including my client's inability to either control his anger or frustration and his inexperience in babysitting.
Based on his short life now, what is to say he won't do this again?
Well, we don't know that. I think it's completely unlikely. It was a situational, circumstantial thing.
The record will show that you admitted on July 23rd, 2013, in a phone call to your mother from the holding center, you stated, and I got a quote from the court reporter, "I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury, and they're going to feel sorry for me." End quote.
Typical. It's used a lot though. Not new.
Tony Farmer was considered a star athlete. He excelled at basketball on his high school team in Ohio. He was considered
damn, what's wrong with Ohio?
In the U.S.
What are the criminals over there?
Future in the sports industry. In August of 2012, when Farmer was 18 years old, he he was handed a 3-year prison sentence. Apartment surveillance cameras caught a heated fight between Farmer and his ex-girlfriend on Lane in April of 2012. Details of what caused the altercation are foggy, but the videos told the most important parts of the story. Farmer hit Lane several times and assaulted her in a variety of attacks. The tense dispute grew increasingly more violent between the two, and Lane tried to run away to escape the fight and give them both time to calm down. Farmer wasn't done though, and chased her down. He grabbed her by the hair and while dragging her out of his car, continued to beat her. He managed to wrestle the young woman into his car and drive away. After that, no one knows what really happened, but Lane eventually came forward about the attack, and Farmer was arrested for domestic abuse.
Jesus.
During the trial, a second charge of kidnapping was added to the case. A plea argument was offered that would have reduced the charges against it. However, this deal meant a sentence of 2 to 8 years in prison. Farmer rejected the agreement and pled guilty to all charges. Farmer's ex, Lane, testified against him in court, and this testimony, combined with the undeniable video proof, made it impossible for Farmer to be anything but guilty. Lane did, however, plead to the judge not to sentence Farmer to prison time, but instead requested a probation or alternative that Farmer's attorney also requested. Farmer was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years behind bars and probation upon his release. As the judge handed down the sentence, Farmer reacted in pure shock. His jaw dropped and his eyes welled with tears as he continuously looked to his attorney for help. Farmer fell to the floor almost as though he fainted, and officers had to lift him back up as he almost fell again numerous times. While this outburst was not crazy or disturbing, it was very sad for some. Andrea Lane and her family cried alongside Farmer's relatives. The Lane family even went as far as later contacting the judge to request leniency. After his release, Farmer was denied acceptance into several colleges and was turned away from every team he aimed to, due to his public record now containing a felony conviction.
7, that the defendant shall serve a term of 3 years, which is the minimum on count 1 of that. As to count 2, in that case, felonious assault, a felony of the 2nd degree, it is ordered that the defendant shall serve a term of 2 years in prison on that count. As to count 3 of that case, the robbery, which is also a felony of the 2nd degree, the court orders that the defendant shall serve a term of 2 years on that count as well. I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished.
Lost of words.
I haven't finished. On the sole count of the indictment in case 564206, the felony of the 3rd degree, the court orders that the defendant shall serve a term of 9 months in prison on that count. All of these terms are going to be served concurrently, which means that the defendant is, in effect, going to spend 3 years in prison.
Number 3.
Keep your hands off of people.
In early 2013, 16-year-old Lance Dyer was accused of pulling a gun on a police officer. Police received a report pertaining to a stolen car and issued the license plate number to on-duty officers in the area. Shortly after the alert was sent out, an officer spotted the stolen vehicle on a busy city road. The officer pursued the driver and a highway chase began. Several other officers responded to the call for backup and joined in on the case. The driver was identified as Lance Dyer, and Dyer eventually drove into a neighborhood, parked the car, and tried to escape on foot. While running, he pulled out a gun and threatened to shoot. He even went as far as loading up the gun and pointing it at a person. This officer shot Dyer in the hand, which caused him to drop the gun and end his escape. Dyer was arrested, and a court trial was opened to assign punishment for his charges. The trial lasted about a year, and the young man spent his 17th birthday behind bars.
Jesus.
In 2014, the ordeal finally came to an end when the court agreed on a sentence. Dyer stood at a podium as the judge read out the details of the punishment. The judge discussed that pulling a gun on an officer was the worst thing that he could have done, and that he was lucky to even be alive.
The worst thing?
He also accused the teen of showing no remorse for his actions and stated that he was a threat to society. The sentence was 11 years in prison, with no chance of parole, and as the sentence was announced, Dyer surprisingly remained calm. His sister, though, who was present in the courtroom, did the opposite. As soon as she heard the length of the sentence, she jumped from her seat and began screaming. She was forcibly removed from the courtroom and then banned from the property. This outburst effectively shows another side of teens being sentenced, the pain and suffering of the family.
Anything further from the state?
Man, my brother got 13 years old.
I can't think of anything more serious than someone pointing a loaded weapon at a police officer. You are lucky to be standing here in front of me today instead of being
Number 2.
You're lucky to be sitting.
This case involves a controversial suspect that many feel deep sympathy for. Others see him as evil and believe he got what he deserved, though. 17-year-old Jacob Morgan allegedly set his Rock Hill home on fire in March of 2015. Though the investigation could not determine exactly how the fire was started, it was confirmed that it was sparked intentionally and in numerous spots across the house. Morgan stood outside of the home after the fire broke out and watched it burn as his 14-month-old brother Joshua Hill remained trapped in the flames. The infant did not make it out in time, and firefighters eventually put out the fire and police officers arrested Morgan for questioning. Morgan originally claimed that the fire was an accident and that he attempted to save his brother but was unsuccessful. However, evidence shows that Morgan had his cell phone in his pocket as he stood outside and failed to try and get help. The fire was only attended to after neighbors called for help. Morgan was charged with involuntary manslaughter, unlawful conduct with a child, and arson. Morgan's mother and stepfather insisted that the teen was innocent and did not deliberately harm his infant brother. They explained that Morgan had the mental standing of a much younger child and that his disability led him to develop an obsession with fire. The parents believed that
Here
Morgan
comes the
did
mental
start the
issues.
fire, but did not consider how quickly
It's not about
it
race.
spread, and also due to his disability, didn't fully comprehend how to save his brother. Morgan accepted a special plea deal in which he would accept punishment for the crimes without admitting guilt. In 2016, the judge accepted this, and Morgan was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The video shows Morgan's reaction throughout the court hearing, and the judge recounts the circumstances of the crime and insists that Morgan was aware of the severity of his actions and needs to accept responsibility. Morgan sobs uncontrollably as he listens, and at this point, it's easy to see how the young man could be seen as emotionally underdeveloped, as he looks like a small and scared child. When the 15-year sentence is announced, Morgan breaks down even more and continues to violently cry as he's escorted out.
The now 7 day to set a fire in the bedroom where the child is in the crib sleeping. A burn pattern that goes from underneath that child towards the door of the bedroom. That is caused by likely something. It's a significant burn pattern as he described it. It could have been alcohol, it could have been something else that gets consumed by the fire. But a significant burn pattern shows that there is something significant and intentional.
I believe the state has, in fact, met their burden. So therefore, I am going to find that there is probable cause to charge the individual that he found over for general session for those charges.
Number 1. This video documents the chaos in the courtroom when a teen is sentenced. 18-year-old Fernando Salgado was accused of assaulting a teen at school with a piece of metal bar. Charges were filed after Salgado, a teacher from the school, and 2 other students were identified as the ones that assaulted this young woman in a campus bathroom. DNA and other evidence confirmed that Salgado was at least involved in the attack, so a trial did not occur. Instead, Salgado pled guilty to the felony charges of assault with a deadly weapon and sexual assault with a foreign object. Salgado formed a plea deal that prevented him from going to court and receiving a worse sentence. In exchange, Salgado agreed to work with officers to testify against his teacher and provide more information. Salgado's sentence required him to spend 180 days in jail and a few years on probation. Additionally, he was required to register as a sex offender. When the sentence was delivered, Salgado began crying and begging for mercy. The outburst set off the rest of his family in the courtroom, and a massive screaming and crying could be heard. Salgado struggles against officers to try to calm him down as he desperately begs and cries. Salgado's family was devastated by the decision, but many others argue that he got less than what he deserved. Salgado and his family were eventually escorted out of the courtroom.
Sorry, sir. If you do the crime, you gotta pay the time. You know, some people do less than you. Conspiracy, getting life in prison, and more possible parole for being rude. And you did a sexual assault using a weapon. Know you're a registered sex offender. Jesus. You do the crime, you pay the time. Thank you so much for watching KMR TV Reaction. Who can do you besides doing you? Good night.